Hello, it's Anthony Scaramucci. Now, we have a quick favor that we want to ask of you. YouTube is telling me that over half of you watching don't subscribe. Guys, this is really upsetting. To the 49% that subscribe, well done. I love you. To the other 51%, I like you, but Katty's really not happy with you. Could you please do me a favor? What are you waiting for? Help us out. Subscribing helps us out a lot. So if you like our content, please hit that subscribe button below to support the show. It's somewhere down here.
Welcome to The Rest is Politics US. I'm Katty K.
I'm Anthony Scaramucci in the US. Okay, Katty K, of course, is a bon vivant. She's a posh bon vivant, and so she's not in the U.S. Where are you, Katty K?
Do we have to do this every time that I'm not in the U.S.? Do we have to reveal our sources? Okay.
Yeah, we do because you're British. You're so British that you don't like the conspicuous consumption of your life.
That's true.
And I am so American that I need to call it out. So where are you,
Okay.
Katty?
I was in Morocco last week, as we know, visiting my sister, and I am in Rome this week visiting my aunt. You know, this is going to take a while if we're going to do this every time, because every time I go and visit a member of my family, I may have to go to New Zealand to visit my brother. I may have to go to Malta to visit my other brother.
Oh, no, we're gonna do this, Katty K.
Okay.
I mean, you have way more fans than me, but my fans want to know where you are.
Okay.
That's what they ask me. Okay.
Hence this, can you see this lovely green room that I am in?
Yes, beautiful. Very, very Roman, very beautiful.
I'm looking out over a lovely piazza, and I had a very delicious bowl of pasta for lunch, so I'm ready to go. All good.
You know how I can tell you're not in America? That TV behind you is like the size of a contact lens, okay?
And this is big by the standards of some of the hotels I've been in Europe.
All right, what are we going to talk about, Katty K? What are we talking about?
Talking of Europe, actually, this is a good place to be. Joe Biden was meant to be here today, but he can't be here because of those awful wildfires. And I'm thinking of friends. I have a couple of friends who have lost houses in California, so we are thinking of them today. But Joe Biden canceled his trip to come and see the Pope. He was meant to be here today. He's not here. But we are going to talk about Europe's other anxiety, which is Donald Trump flirting with the idea of taking over Greenland. He's also talked about taking over the Panama Canal. He has also talked about taking over Canada. So this has got allies in a little bit of a flurry. And I think we should try and sort through some of the signal and noise on this. How serious could this be? But I have a kind of slightly counterintuitive thought on the Greenland part of this, and we can get into that, which is that he's actually raising an issue that needs to be raised, and that the strategic importance of Greenland for global security has to be discussed. I don't think it means that Greenland has to be nabbed by Donald Trump, even though Don Jr. flew in there yesterday, handing out MAGA hats to the few passers-by who were around. But I do think there is a security issue there. And then the second part of the show, we are going to talk about big tech cozying up to Donald Trump, having spent years kind of hiding themselves away in Silicon Valley. They all now seem to love the power center of Washington, D.C., or what's about to become the power center of Washington, D.C., and how Zuckerberg has done a little bit of a volte-face when it comes to restrictions and protections on his platform. So we're going to talk about that in the second half. But let's kick off with Greenland. I've had a couple of conversations with European officials about this, and the Danes are taking this seriously. They think they hear all the stuff about how this is just Donald Trump. He floats things. It's the beginning of negotiations. Read the first 3 pages of The Art and the Deal, and you'll see that Donald Trump goes in without a plan and then kind of makes a few phone calls and comes up with some idea of a plan. And that maybe this is Donald Trump just kind of as an opening bid. But they are taking this seriously. They are looking at the security of Greenland, and they are wondering what they could do if Donald Trump really does want to take over that huge big island, which, fair is fair, is probably closer to North America than it is to Denmark.
Have you been to Greenland?
I have never been. No, have you been?
No, I've never been. You know, what's interesting is I ask people if they've been to Greenland, and some of them say, well, they landed there. These are usually very posh people that have private planes, and they refuel
even
in
posher
Greenland.
Than you and me.
Possibly not posher than you, but definitely posher than me. I mean, you set yourself up on that one. But let me just say this to you. Okay, the problem of all this is the lack of historical understanding of how we got to where we are at this moment in global history and where we need to go. So if you tell me the ice is melting, those northern passages through the Arctic are going to be very important for commercial shipping lanes, important for national security interests. And we do have threats. We have ideological threats. We live in a Western-style democracy. Europe is in primarily most of all of Western Europe is in Western-style democracies. And if you're telling me that this is going to be a national security issue for all of us, I got that. If you're telling me that the United States is taking it, it's either going to take it militarily or it's going to take it or try to buy it. It could try to buy it. Okay, then we got to go back in time. We need Dominic Sandbrook and Tom Holland to talk about colonialism and to talk about the scourges of colonialism, the bad karma of it, and the potential impact. But if you had a real transformational leader at the helm of the United States, they would be in touch with Denmark and they would be doing this very, very differently. It wouldn't be a bully at the bully pulpit acting like a bully saying, well, we're going to take Greenland and this is going to happen or that's going to happen. You wouldn't do it that way, okay, because it's a middle school, immature way to do it. But if you said, hey, I'd like to meet with the Prime Minister of Denmark, I'd like to visit Greenland, I'd like to explain to these people the world we're heading into and how we need each other, and the U.S. would like to have a strategic foothold there, which would benefit Denmark and would benefit others. And if you said to Denmark, hey, you've got a 2%, 3% threshold on NATO. You're a member of NATO. Let us have some more resources here in Greenland, and we'll carry your burden militarily in NATO. I don't know, something like that. All of a sudden, this becomes a transformational, visionary leader who's not just the leader of the United States, but is the leader of Western civilization and the leader of free people everywhere. As Jack Kennedy said in Ich bin ein Berliner, I am a Berliner. I am standing here before this wall, but I am you. I represent a beacon of freedom and hope for mankind. But we don't have that. We have, here's a MAGA hat and, take it or leave it.
Are you suggesting that...
You know why you're laughing?
Donald Trump Jr. I am laughing because you are suggesting that Donald Trump Jr. flying in with that kind of Trump plane and landing in Greenland and passing out a whole, half dozen MAGA huts is not quite the same as John F. Kennedy turning up in Berlin at the height of the Cold War. Not quite the same level of political sophistication.
From a presidential perspective, in the terms of modern presidents, I tried to come up with the antipode. Okay, I tried the best I could to go to the diametrically opposite side of what this jackass is actually doing so that we could explain to people how dangerous this actually is. So there's another issue going on. There's an ancestral issue as it relates to the residents of Greenland. They may want to be linked to the United States. I don't know. My point is, though,
how he's handling it.
Yeah, but also should a group of people in this generation make that decision for the next 500 generations of Greenlanders? There's a mood and there's a whimsy today, but it may not be the mood and whimsy of tomorrow. And so, but for me, I would say this to you, and please forgive me because I've really looked at this and it's my opinion, and hopefully there'll be somebody that'll counteract what I'm saying. The scourge of colonialism has hurt the United Kingdom. Has it helped the United Kingdom? Certainly, but it has hurt the United Kingdom. The scourge of colonialism has hurt the United States. Okay, we still have problems in Cuba. We still have problems around the world, frankly, for some of the things that we've done. I would say the same for the French in Morocco. I would say the same for
the Belgians.
The Belgians in Africa. We need to figure out, as a group of very smart people, how do we live in harmony with each other and how we're sensitive to each other's indigenous natures, but how we also have to be committed to the common weal. We have to be committed to the common idea that we are better together to protect our own individual identities and our own individual freedoms.
That is the antithesis of Donald Trump's view of foreign policy. The idea that we're better together, right?
Well, that's why I got my ass fired after 11 days.
Clearly,
and that's why
you're not going back again.
I am your podcast co-host, as opposed to working on the MAGA team handing out hats in Greenland. First of all, to not even understand the buffoonery of this, okay, to sit there. And here's the thing. What about these spineless people that are Republicans that are watching this and they know how wrong it is and they know how absurd it is and they know that we don't need to do this, that we could accomplish these goals. We could go to the Panamanian and say, listen, we've been somewhat lax on this whole thing. You can't have the Chinese here. We've been professing the Monroe Doctrine since the early 1800s. We can go to the Canadians and say, listen, we've got the North America Free Trade Agreement. We need to bolster it or revisit it or reset it. You're not going to be able to police that navigation to your north if those ices melt. And you're going to need our help, and we need to get more conjoined together. We have a lot of common interests. We could do it that way, or we could act like a jackass. I'm sorry to use that word on this podcast, at a bully pulpit, acting like a bully.
What it highlights is that Trump can hit on a kernel of a good idea, right? I mean, I do think the fact that the ice cap is melting, that these routes are going to open up, that the Chinese tried to build 3 airports on Greenland, that the Russian submarine activity has recently been increasing in the area, the amount of rare earth minerals that China controls in the world has 44 million tons, virtually a monopoly. Greenland has 1.5 million tons, important for America. Would China ever use its rare earth minerals in a trade war as some kind of weapon against the rest of the world? All of that is making Greenland central. Its geography, what it has, the fact that the ice cap is melting. So actually, I think there is a valid discussion to be had about who would be the best steward of Greenland for global security, right? I mean, not just for America's security. And that is the problem, that Donald Trump phrases all of this just in terms of American security. He didn't even say the security of the West or the security of Western democracies. He just said, for America's security, we must have it. Well, that doesn't go down great with Denmark, and it doesn't go down great even with Greenlanders. So he has this idea, but he just doesn't know how to couch it or express it or act upon it in a way that doesn't make it seem entirely transactional, with him being the sole beneficiary or him representing the United States being the sole beneficiary. And if there was a way, as you say, of having a kind of opening a discussion, actually the Danish, interestingly, are open to that discussion. I mean, this has put the Danish prime minister in a god-awful position, because she can't afford to alienate the Americans. She can't afford to alienate Donald Trump. I mean, she is going through what every European leader is going through at the moment, but on steroids. And she does want to do something about protecting the security of Greenland and its assets. But she also doesn't want to be looking like she's selling off Greenland entirely, allowing the Greenlanders, because in the end, this would come down to a plebiscite in Greenland. And could they be bought? She doesn't want to make it look like she's not taking Greenland's security seriously and is prepared just to let Donald Trump go and buy it. I mean, the thing about the image of Donald Trump Jr. flying in almost made it look like this was a Trump family purchase. I mean, it's not even just America. There was something about the Trump plane. He didn't even wait for it to be Air Force One or whatever Donald Trump Jr. would have flown on. It made it look very sort of family acquisitionist. So it does put allies in a difficult position. It makes them wonder how reliable America is, how volatile this administration is going to be, and what to expect. And whilst many of them are saying, European diplomats I've spoken to have said, look, we have to separate signal from noise. He may just be floating this. He may not. He may really intend to do this. And I think that's worrying for allies. And it also sends a message, Europeans have told me, to adversaries saying, listen, the era in which we have kind of great power spheres of influence, and you can nab that bit of land and I can control that bit of land, that's kind of open season again. And I don't think any of that is great for global security, let alone the poor people of Greenland, although they do now have some very nice MAGA hats.
A couple of things. On the western side of Greenland, there's the Baffin Bay, and I'm proposing that we turn that into the Bay of America. I think that's something we should probably do. As you go down to the Labrador Sea, there's the Davis Strait. Yeah. So I think that should be the DJT Strait. I think it's and by the way, it's shorter. So you might as well just put that on there. Yeah. And then on the eastern side, let's let Iceland continue with the Iceland Sea, but the Greenland Sea should obviously be just called USAC, don't you think?
Well, I think you should just do MAGA Sea.
MAGA Sea, yeah, MAGA Sea, yeah. Like that better.
I mean, we don't have a MAGA Sea in the world, so I think that would be good.
I like that better. Now, the two oceans, like the Pacific and the Atlantic, I think Trump is enough of a traditionalist that he'll want to keep those names. Yeah. Okay, but we're just getting the administration started. We'll have to see where it
could become the American Atlantic. That could be good.
He's very close to a guy named Tim Apple. I don't know if you know who Tim Apple is, but he runs Apple Computer. And so he'll go to him and the map makers at Apple and say we should change it. So for me, here's the thing I would say to you, and this is the thing about Trump that people do like. So let's be objective here. He says things that other people are thinking. Like he says, okay, why did we dump all that water in the Pacific Ocean when you needed it? And why do we have irresponsible urban leaders knowing that you have wildfires like this? Why aren't you set up for it?
In Canada. Yeah.
And why aren't you set up for it when you know you could be set up for it, but you've decided through what you see what the Democrats are losing? We want to govern on style and not substance. We want to put DEA people, DEI people in just for the sake of it. We want to do certain things that make us look better from a virtue signal, but we actually are not governing properly. Okay. And Trump is saying things that people like, Katty. He's saying things that people like. They're like, well, I would like there to be less crime in this subway. I would like there to be less violence on our streets. I would like there to be people that are in government that help us control wildfires and let it rage. You know, the American military has bases out there. They could have deployed planes, but what are you guys doing? Are you going to wait for the entire city to burn down? So you've got a crisis of governmental incompetence going on.
Right.
And then you have a buffoon who is your crazy uncle, armchair quarterback, armchair football analyst. He's calling shots from the seats.
The one thing that they've also told us, haven't they? I mean, what people want is no more wars. I mean, that's why this also doesn't, fit with the Donald Trump pulling us out of the wars agenda, because look, maybe he just wants us to be talking about him and none of this is serious. And he has absolutely no intention of trying to take Greenland or the Panama Canal back. But if he were to, Greenland is a member of NATO. It's a member of the European Union. It's not an easy thing to do. You've got the French and the Germans saying, hold on a second, we respect Europe's territorial integrity. And one thing the American voters have made very clear is they don't want more military engagement. I mean, that's what I slightly don't understand about this. Why is Greenland that important to Donald Trump when he was elected partly on a platform of no more wars and no more foreign engagement? And yet he hasn't even got into office and he's talking about the possibility of not one but two potential military conflicts.
Okay. I want to make you the comms director for the Trump people.
Okay. For 11 days or longer do I have?
No doubt you'll last longer than me. But for the next several minutes, you're the comms director. I'm going to say something. I want you to react to it. So I'm the MAGA people. And we have goals. And what are our goals? We need to present America as more muscular because we're macho people. We eat a lot of bacon and we need to present America as more muscular and we're going to flex on the world. At the same time, we have national security interests in Greenland and Panama and Canada. And so what we'd like to do is have more control over these situations. So how should we do it? Should we do it the Donald Trump way or Katty K? What would be your recommendation as a comms person and a U.S. diplomat to achieve the goals that the United States is trying to achieve? Because there is something underneath the nonsense of what Donald Trump is saying.
Yeah, it's right. I agree.
So tell us what is underneath the nonsense and then tell us what you would do to achieve those goals.
Well, that's why I was saying this is a conversation that does need to be had, that Greenland is becoming increasingly strategically important. The Chinese are circling it. The Russians are circling it. They're both eyeing their own interests in that area. They're both trying to do soft and potentially hard with their subs, more hard with their subs, influence bearing. And it's not in the United States' interest and it's not in Western Europe's interest. So I think I would be fired in this case after about 3 minutes. I would probably couch this in terms of a Western hemispheric discussion that needs to be had about how do we protect Western democracy's interests when it comes to Greenland and shoring up to make sure that Greenland is viable and is protected. And one radar base that America has, its most northernmost radar base in Greenland, is probably not going to cut it. That's not enough to ensure Greenland's security and therefore the security of other Western European nations. But that would get me thrown out of the White House, Donald Trump's White House, in about a hot minute.
You're now the Prime Minister of Denmark.
Yeah. Oh my God, poor woman.
And I pick up the phone, I call you, okay, and I say, hey, how are you? We have mutual interests. I want to do a deal in Greenland, and I'm going to give you $200 billion worth of gold or $200 billion worth of something that's not U.S. dollar related, that's of quote unquote global value for this province. And as a result of which, I'm also going to fund the Greenlanders with different incentives, the same way we fund the Alaskans. Okay, there's a fund up there, and we're going to fund these people, and a result of which you'll have a foothold here, but we're going to have a much bigger foothold. That would be my recommendation to help us protect the Western world.
As the Danish Prime Minister, this is not actually my decision to make. It has to be the people of Greenland's decision to make. So it would have to go to a plebiscite, I guess, in Greenland. We would have to canvass them in some way and ask them if this is something that they wanted.
You are such a nice person. It's like unbelievable. This is the reason why you have a much larger fan base than me. You are such a nice person.
This is my subtle way of telling Donald Trump to, back off. It's a way of saying, this is not, Mr. Trump, my decision to make. It has to go to the people of Greenland.
No, but you didn't do that, Katty K. You did not do that because
but you don't need to say that. That's an effective way of saying that. But Greenland, as she has said,
because now you're calling it out a vote. You have Greenlanders voting on it.
Right.
But let me ask you this: if you're Abraham Lincoln, and do you want the citizens of South Carolina to vote on their secession from the United States?
No.
Okay, so do you want the Greenlanders?
It's always a risk that as Britain knows, when it had, took a referendum on Brexit, referendums can go the way you may or you may not want them to go, or unexpected ways.
But I'm just saying, a leader like Lincoln would never let that vote happen.
No.
You say, look, I'm sorry, this is part of our country. It's not part of your country.
Yeah.
We're in the same military alliance.
She has said this. She said this on the BBC a couple of days ago, that this is the Greenlanders' decision to make, that this is not something that is in her remit.
That's a mistake.
Yeah. At the moment, the polls, to the extent that you have them, and this comes from Danish journalists who are in Greenland at the moment interviewing people, it doesn't look like there's really any support for Donald Trump to come along and try and buy Greenland. And that's partly because Greenlanders would also want guarantees of a social democratic lifestyle, right? I mean, they have free healthcare, they have free education. Now, of course, America could fund that, they could do that, but that's not the way America works. They look at American society, they see that's not what the game is in the United States. They are European in that respect, and they are social democratic Europeans in that respect. So I don't think that is something that the Greenlanders are about to sign on for. Greenland, it's interesting because it is a little bit of a confusing situation. It is also a constitutional issue, and the Danish Prime Minister has said very clearly that Greenland is not for sale, that it can't be bought. But she does want America to be involved.
I just want to throw something at you. There's a beautiful island. It's off the coast of Europe. It's got northern positions and southern positions. And, I don't know. I think it would be a really good military and strategic foothold for the United States.
And it's got very nice palaces in its capital with people who wear like old-fashioned crowns and things, which would be sort of fun, right, for Americans.
Great accents.
Yeah, and apparently they're very high IQ people. So Donald Trump would like that.
I mean, is that where we're going? And you know what? We could change we only have to change one word. It's united.
Already.
There's another word called kingdom. We just have to change it. This is insane, Katty K. This is insane.
So you wonder why I'm coming around Europe and I'm in hotel lobbies, and the poor Americans who are checking in to their hotel in Rome, the first question they are being asked about is Donald Trump seriously going to buy Greenland? And is Italy next? Ha, ha, ha. But I've pitied, this is a rough time to be in Europe as an American, because here we go again. And I heard that conversation. I thought, here we go again. This is going to be like Trump administration 1, where all of Europe has its hair on fire over everything he says.
When we heard Trump's speech after he came down the elevator in June of 2015, he said, the Mexicans, they're not sending their best. But you know what? The Americans, starting on January 20th, 2025, not sending their best to face the rest of the world.
By the way, your idea that Donald Trump might go for Greenland, Panama Canal, Canada, and then that little funny island off the coast of Europe has caused so much dismay amongst our producers that your tenure in the goal hanger family may be a little, precarious at the moment.
It's been tenuous. Yeah. It's been tenuous since day one. I wasn't even your first choice for this podcast.
Oh, okay, right. Moving along.
It's been tenuous since day one.
We're going to be looking this half at what Silicon Valley is doing to try and curry favor with Donald Trump, and in particular, Mark Zuckerberg, because this week, Mark Zuckerberg announced that Meta is going to end its fact-checking programs across all of its social media sites. It was a program that was launched after the 2016 election, when Facebook had come under fire for allowing misinformation to spread unchecked. After the 2020 election, Donald Trump's own Facebook account was shut down because of the riots of January the 6th. If you haven't heard our series on January the 6th and what happened there, it's a fantastic look at how we got to January the 6th and what the significance of January the 6th is for America. Quick plug. But Mark Zuckerberg is basically rowing back from having said that he's very worried about misinformation, that he wants to help protect democracy. He's kind of gone full libertarian, doesn't want to be in the business of policing content anymore on his platforms, and has also appointed 2 more Republicans to prominent positions. He's got somebody in charge of global affairs who is a Republican, and he's put an ally of Donald Trump's on the board of Meta. So he's made these moves this week, which are a very clear political sign that he sees which way the political wind is blowing, and he's trying to do what he can to catch up, I think, with Elon Musk, who has got so close to Donald Trump that all of the other big social media and Silicon Valley titans, billionaires, are wondering what they can do to be second, third, fourth in line in Donald Trump's favors after Elon Musk. And I think the impact, even as Mark Zuckerberg himself has said, is that there will be more bad stuff online, on Meta, on Facebook in particular. They won't catch everything because it's now going to be left to these community notes, to basically the users of these social platforms to try and catch stuff that is a conspiracy theory, that is inciting hate, or that could be leading to hateful actions against people. A member of the board which oversees Meta has said she's very worried. Actually, she's a former Danish prime minister. Perhaps that's a bit of a coincidence. She's very worried about what this could lead to in terms of hate actions, not just hate speech against some minority groups, but hate actions against minority groups. So there's kind of a lot of concern about it, but I think we are in peak Silicon Valley cozies up to Washington moment. Having for years Silicon Valley kind of operated as a separate entity on the other side of the country, we now have a full embrace of the new administration by all of those tech titans. Fair to say, Anthony?
No, I think it's very fair to say, and I want to provide, if it's okay, a little bit of context from my perspective. I visit Silicon Valley. I have investments out there, venture capital investments. I have relationships in the area. You would say, okay, it's San Francisco. It's very liberal.
Yeah.
And you would say, yes, there are very liberal people in there. You know, there's the Ron Conways and the Reid Hoffmans. You can see them on the liberal donor list. But there's a pocket of libertarianism.
Yes.
A pocket of conservatism. And they've hidden in the shadows for what I would say 25 years.
And I would put Mark Zuckerberg in that bucket, wouldn't you?
Okay. And so I'll tell a quick story. Naval Ravikant. Do you know who that is?
No.
Okay, so Naval Ravikant, you could look him up. He is a brilliant philosopher king in Silicon Valley. He's the founder of AngelList, and he's considered one of the shamans of Silicon Valley in terms of his knowledge, his worldliness, and his vision. And so Naval Ravikant was on my show, Wall Street Week, in 2016. I was working at the Fox Business Channel. I was the host of Wall Street Week. I bought it from the Rukeyser family. I negotiated with Roger Ailes the opportunity to host it for him. And I was interviewing Naval. When the cameras came off, he leaned over to me and said, "You're a Trump supporter?" I said, "Yes, I am. I'm a lifelong Republican." And he said, "Listen, I am a Trump supporter. I could never tell anybody that because I live in Silicon Valley and we have to live in the shadows. The libertarians among us have to live in the shadows." And I'm going to tell you what happened here. In my opinion, I'd like you to react to it. The dam broke because the Democrats for the last 15 years have been governing on style rather than substance. The dam broke because they destroyed the city of San Francisco. The dam broke because every policy that these guys want in Silicon Valley that will help further their goals of innovation, help further their goals of more venture capital investing in the U.S. have been curbed by the Democrats. And so all it took were one or two voices, David Sachs, the all-in podcasters, a few voices to say, you know, I'm done. Sean McGuire, you probably don't know who he is, but I do, and some people listening may know. He works at Sequoia. Sean McGuire is a brilliant guy. I've had dinner with Sean McGuire. Sean McGuire said, you know, Trump just got shot at and he was missed. July, you and I got on an emergency podcast that night. Sean McGuire said, I'm giving a $300,000 check to Donald Trump tonight, and I'm supporting his candidacy. And then the dominoes fell. Elon Musk, the rest of those groups. And now all of a sudden, space has been created for all of these people who were living in the shadows to come forward.
I'm wondering if it's really that they are opposed to what Democrats have done, to the DEI stuff and to the state of San Francisco, which has obviously become kind of, homeless central, or whether it's just that they see an opportunity to make even more money. These are people who have made billions. You may wonder why they want to make more billions, since we know that at a certain point, it doesn't actually make you happier anymore. But they see this as a kind of golden age of mergers and acquisitions under the Trump second administration. They can consolidate even more, even though we are in a position where one company owns 2/3 of global social media. That's Meta. One company owns 50% of e-commerce. That's Amazon. One company owns 90% of all share search. That's Google. I mean, I don't know how much more these people need to have consolidated monopolies under them, but I think they are heading into a era in this administration where it'll be gloves off when it comes to regulation. Although interestingly, you've got people like Marsha Blackburn, the senator from Tennessee, who is a huge Trump ally, who is also in favor of much more regulation on some of these social media platforms. So that's going to be interesting to see how that pans out. But I think they feel this is a chance for them to make even more money. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg this week did two things. He managed to placate a president who had once threatened to throw him in jail, president-elect who had once threatened to throw him in jail for booting him off Facebook. And he gets to satisfy his shareholders by saving $4 or $5 billion a year on safety teams. I mean, it's win-win all around. And Meta becomes even more important. So is this really about the Democrats and their policies? Or is this about a president who has made it a president-elect who has made it very clear that it's, boom time for M&A, boom time for these big businesses, back off on any form of regulation or content moderation, and that makes them more money.
It's certainly some of that, Katty. I agree with you. You don't get to be a billionaire if you're Mr. Moral, Mr. Uber principal.
No. How much more consolidation of e-commerce, social media, search is healthy for American capitalism? I don't know, Anthony. I don't know whether that's the best way for the country to go at a time of massively expanding income inequality in the West and in America as well.
I've got to say this to you because I want you to react to it. Okay. Mark Zuckerberg, I've met him a few times at the World Economic Forum. I've heard him speak.
What's he like? In person?
I like him. Look, I'm also friends with the Winklevosses, and they're very sore at him for what happened. The two twins that came up with the Facebook idea, they feel that he unfairly...
Just watch the movie Social Network and you'll get a sense of what we're talking about.
Right. He feel like they hijacked it. They got a multiple hundreds of millions of dollars of settlement. They flipped it into Bitcoin and into billions of dollars. And they're two great guys. I know them better than I know Zuckerberg. But Zuckerberg is, to me, an interesting guy because he's married happily. He's a family guy. He's very loyal to his employees. I know executives at Facebook that have been there literally 20 plus years, as long as Facebook has been in existence. And he is searching for the right answers. He's an accountable guy. Lots of mistakes have been made at Facebook. You remember that very famous congressional testimony where there were people that have committed suicide, teenagers, cyberbullied, committed suicide. He stood up, tried to be accountable for that. He's trying to make the right changes. I tell my friends, I'm not a fan of social media for these young kids. Maybe the Australians are right, ban it until they're 16. It is a substance, okay? It's a dopamine substance for the brain.
So here's a question on Zuckerberg then.
But it's going to exist, Katty.
I agree that it's going to exist. Do you think the Zuckerberg who stood up in his suit and tie in congressional hearings and kind of did a mea culpa, and he did a similar mea culpa after January the 6th, as we said, and he did a similar mea culpa after the massacre of Rohingya Muslims in Burma because Facebook had been accused of being the platform on which conspiracies spread against these people, and then they were subject to genocidal attacks. Do you think that is the Mark Zuckerberg who is the real Mark Zuckerberg? Or do you think the real Mark Zuckerberg is the one we are seeing now who is, actually, I never really wanted to do any content moderation. Let this be, as he said in that video that he put out, this is a moment of free speech. And he's getting back to my understanding from interviews with people who work in the company is that actually this is what he's very comfortable with this much more libertarian, let's not police this, let's not try and stamp out misinformation, that's actually what he feels these social media platforms should really be.
I think it's both. I think there's a portfolio in his brain where some of it is just, these are things I need to do for my company. Some of it is I'm actually way more libertarian than people originally thought when I got to Silicon Valley. And I think some of it is, hey, I'm not stupid. Donald Trump is not the normal politician. He's oligarchic and he's Putin-esque. And I don't want to be on the wrong side of him because him and his minions at the Department of Justice can hassle me. If you're a multi-billionaire, like a centa billionaire, there's only one thing that can get you, Katty K. Obviously, death, taxes, you don't give a shit about at this point, but death. But it is the Putin-esque like governmental machinations that could hurt you, take you out of business, falsely imprison you. Now, I'm not saying any of those things are going to happen in the US, but if you had a 1% probability that that was going to happen, and so you could be Jeff Bezos and give millions of dollars to congressional campaigns, $1 million to the inaugural, spend $40 million on a documentary that's very flowery of Melania Trump.
Which he has just done.
Yeah. So the first thing Donald Trump said to me after I left the press room, I gave a press conference on the 21st of July, Friday afternoon. I walked up the stairs in the West Wing from lower press, up the stairs. I crossed through the Oval Office into the study. First thing Donald Trump said to me, great job. Do you think we can break up Amazon? I said, what? I hate this son of a bitch, Bezos. I hate the Washington Post. They're a pack of thieves and liars. I want to destroy Jeff Bezos. How do we break up Amazon? And again, made so many mistakes in my 11-day period. I looked at him, because I'd actually taken antitrust in law school. And I said, no, you have the Sherman Antitrust Act. There's 7 or 8 boxes that have to be checked to break up Amazon. Not possible to break up Amazon. Not the answer he wanted to hear, by the way. But we've now gone from that day, 8-ish years later, Bezos has spent $50, $80 million pleasing Donald Trump.
Yeah. And it's managed. I mean, it's very interesting. Your friend Scott Galloway, who's the professor at New York University, who has a podcast and spends a lot of time thinking and talking about tech and business. What made me think of this was your reference to Russia. He thinks America is in a full Russia kleptocracy moment, and that the sight of these billionaires going down and doing what they're doing to make Donald Trump happy in order to try to win contracts for their companies, or in order to try to get regulation that is favorable to their companies, or in order to try to get whatever it is, regulation that is unfavorable to their competitors. He says that this is not American capitalism as it should be and as it works. This is Russian style kleptocracy, and that's what you're seeing in action here.
Well said. I hope we'll have to see Dana White on testosterone replacement therapy, muscular, mid-50s Dana White, who's promised never to be involved in another political campaign because he thought it was disgusting, is now a board member.
Yeah.
He is the founder of our UFC fighting here in the U.S., board member now at Meta. What say you about that?
Well, I think it's another of those moves, right? It's the equivalent of Jeff Bezos making a flowery documentary about Melania Trump for $40 million. It's, I'm doing everything I can to make my company as attuned as possible, not to the Republican Party, not to conservative values, but to Donald Trump specifically. And that's exactly why he's done it. What do you think about what this does? Because you mentioned teenagers and those hearings they had on Capitol Hill about the damage that some of these social media companies are doing to teenagers. And we've all heard the whistleblowers who have said that, Facebook didn't do enough to try and protect teenagers, and particularly teenage girls. And that also we talk about teenage girls and teenagers and their addiction. This then impacts American families and American parents, whether you are a Republican or a Democrat, whether you voted for Donald Trump or hate Donald Trump, either way, you have a teenager who is impacted by social media. And I wonder what this does now on Facebook. Well, I guess with teenagers, it's Instagram. And I'm assuming, YouTube is going to kind of go the same sort of way fairly soon. They've already been flirting with this. What does this do to America, and not just to teenagers' access to what the crappy stuff they might find on social media, but to Americans' access in general to news that is reliable and fact-check and gives people a common source, what Al Gore used to say, a public news space. Because I think this move could have a serious impact on this. I mean, America has an enormous number of strengths, but one of its weaknesses is the degree at the moment to which Americans are divided. And to some extent, that is because of these algorithms, that we've been pushed by algorithms, news algorithms on these social media platforms into kind of bubbles of rage against each other. And I don't think the moves that we're seeing at the moment from Meta are going to make that any better. And I think that is a weakness for America. I think that is a national security weakness, the amount that people hate each other in the country. And this is going to make it worse.
I know Scott came on Morning Joe a few days ago. I had dinner with Scott the night before he came on Morning Joe, and he certainly believes everything that you're saying. He said something, I believe he said it on the air, and I'll repeat it here, that there were 500 U.S. billionaires 12 years ago. There's now 2,500 U.S. billionaires that we know about.
I heard him say that. The fastest growing demographic group in America is billionaires.
So all of a sudden, though, you get 2,500 billionaires, and you get some groupthink from billionaires that are controlling a very large swath of wealth in the country. They can move the political dial to favor themselves. And I guess what I would say to people historically, that has never worked. Historically, there's been a noblesse oblige from the very wealthy, where they sit around and say, yes, I love my mansion, but I don't want somebody coming to my mansion with a tiki torch and a pitchfork and burning the place down. Maybe we should figure out ways to help some of these people live aspirational lives throughout the economic classes in our country. And I'm worried about this because we said last week, and I caught a lot of SHIT from the Trump people. I said last week, Trump is not MAGA. And you know why I caught a lot of SHIT from some of my buds that still work for Trump? Because they know he's not MAGA. They know. You can't say the truth, okay? But we know he's not MAGA. We know he likes those 2,500 billionaires and he wants to please them. But please them at the peril of the population. Please them at the peril of the population. So this will be interesting to see how this unfolds.
And they want to please him.
They want to please him, Katty.
Mutually beneficial relationship.
They want to please him.
We're going to leave it there. We will be back on Sunday with our question and answer session for our founding members. If you are a founding member, thank you. If you haven't become one yet, think of doing so, because then you can get that extra bonus episode. And also, I'd like to get a quick plug in for our January the 6th series, which started this week. It's 4 episodes long, and it's really all about what happened in the run up to January the 6th, how Donald Trump lost the 2020 election, tried to snatch it back again, and it ended up with those extraordinary scenes that have really fundamentally changed the way the world thinks about America and America thinks about itself. And if you are a founding member, you can get all of those episodes right now without having to wait.
You are a phenomenal salesperson, Katty K. I mean, I'm signed up. I just want you to know I am a founding member. Okay, it's on my Amex and I pay it. You convinced me. I'm a founding member. So please be a founding member alongside of me, and this way you'll be able to listen to Katty K. And by the way, you don't even listen to these shows, which is fun. Another fun part about you. Newsflash, you don't listen to these shows. I listen. You are phenomenal on the January 6th series. And I actually learned a lot researching that series with you.
Me too.
I implore people, please become a founding member, join the show. It's a lot of fun and you'll learn something.
And we'll see you next week.
Take care.